All right, so starting from the bottom of this list here, we've got Stack Bomb RFC, which is blocked by here. There might be some movement on this on the upstream CMB project, so we'll see where that goes in the next week or so. On this source removal build pack, Forrest, I got a couple folks yesterday who asked about this and would be interested in it. I know this is a draft mode, but you kind of had a standing item to figure out what the state of this was. Any update there?
Yes, so I had a quick chat with Emily last week around the reason this was drafted is because one of the upstream utility build packs that was mentioned in the original RFC was a source removal build pack. I had a quick chat with Emily on whether or not that's actually something like donating this all the way upstream would make sense. Emily, if I'm not mistaken, it sounds like there's still quite a bit of back and forth on what actually is going to be included in utilities and what that is going to look like. So I think it might make more sense for us to just move this into, for me to undraft this, move this into a, into like community or something to that effect, and then start supporting it.
Yeah, I think sort of like a gloss on what would be accepted into the C&B project. There's concern there around sort of sprawling to contain too many things that should be outside the scope of the upstream project. Sort of the goal of the utilities build pack is to allow things that would like to be core functionality to be implemented as build packs rather than implemented as part of the life cycle. So it's the kind of thing where if you couldn't imagine it being a lifecycle feature, it probably won't be a utility build pack. So something like that profile, yes, like it used to be a lifecycle feature. We're taking it out and moving it into an architectural place where it makes sense, but probably not something like this.
In that case, then I think there might be maybe a couple more pieces of feedback that I need to address. I don't know. I need to dust this off. It's been sitting for a little while.
Cool. Next up here, we have an RFC for secure runtime environments. I think the thing that this seems to have been kind of blocked on in the last couple of weeks is just there's a request for like a more concrete plan for like next steps. I think people understand conceptually what the idea is here, and I think we've gotten on board with what's being requested. I just think we're maybe missing that plan. Is anyone interested in reaching out to Sam and seeing if we can get that, say, in the next week?
I can do that if no one else wants to.
Awesome. Moving on from that, we've got this other RFC from Sam about removing shell-specific interfaces. This looks like we have majority approval, but I kind of wanted to make sure there wasn't something Dan was maybe objecting to before we merge this. Maybe Dan, if you don't object and we're good to go, you might take over the merging responsibilities.
Yeah, I can do that. I'll take another look and see. Initially I was just hoping for a little more concrete info about how this would roll out.
I think you're right to call out that one way this might affect users is whether or not they can use profile scripts or not. I do think, like when we made this change in the Java build pack, we just kind of did it. And no one really complained about it, especially because there's some inconsistency when profile scripts work anyways, depending on whether you're on like the tiny stack, it won't work to begin with, stuff like that. So I'm kind of on board with just ripping the Band-Aid off on the profile scripts rather than blocking everything on us reintroducing it. But I guess that's the open question.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a strong preference because it doesn't really impact us on the Java side. I was thinking from the PHP side, this could have an impact. And I don't know if any other language families are concerned about that.
So I guess I'm confused. Let me get this straight. The concern here is about users providing their own .profile scripts. But like Buildpacks themselves aren't responsible for like invoking those things. That's like a lifecycle thing. It's like our choice of choosing direct process. Does that impact
Yes.
the invocation of profile?
Yeah, when
Yes.
you switch to direct, it won't do that anymore.
This is sort of how the whole utility build pack conversation got started in a lot of ways, because invoking .profile scripts was a lifecycle feature, but it probably always made more sense to be a build pack feature. Like you could have a build pack that runs this .profile script for you rather than having lifecycle behavior, especially because it doesn't make sense in all environments, right? Not every stack has bash, stuff like that. But it was historically and still is now a lifecycle feature, but it's a lifecycle feature that only works for shell processes for the obvious reasons that you're not going to source a bash script and then execute something that's not bash.
Let's see.
In terms of PHP, what is our current, like, is that like an officially supported language family at the moment? I know we're kind of rewriting a whole bunch of stuff there. Like how, part of me is like, don't have a huge concern for backwards compatibility yet, but I don't know what our expectations are necessarily for users.
It is considered a supported build pack. It's in the, the top level Paketo Buildpacks organization. As far as this particular feature goes, I guess I'm like struggling to understand what are the types of things somebody would put in a .profile that they couldn't like achieve similar results doing something else. Right? Like I'm just trying to imagine a situation where like we do break this and like there is no coming back from it. Like they cannot achieve the thing they were trying to do at all because we've like prevented them from running this .profile script.
It's probably nothing insurmountable. It would just represent like one day build works, one day build fails. And then they have to go figure out why it fails now and make changes to accommodate that. So I'd say probably more of an inconvenience than an outright like breaking and never having a possible workaround.
I don't think right now there's a good way. So the .profile script sort of represents an arbitrary hook, right? Where you could do something before launching your app. I don't think we actually have a great stand-in for an arbitrary hook other than like you could do something with a proc file. Like you could define your own process that then sources a profile script and then executes something. So that I think is the workaround. If we wanted to give someone an even easier workaround, maybe we could, as a transition, we could contribute both types of processes, but just make the direct one default.
Is procfile itself set to direct? It can't be, right? Because like it could just be like a shell script, like cd into this directory and do something.
There's
like, wouldn't the answer just be like include the procfile as the last thing and write a procfile? Like the answer to that is like, okay, if you do that, you're guaranteed to like not have a direct to process. and instead you're going to be able to invoke the profile script you have.
The whole interface of Procfile really only makes sense for shell processes, in my opinion. But I do believe that once upon a time, some functionality was added to it to make it work for direct processes as well, even though the interface doesn't really make sense there. Like it takes that one string and then like shell parses it and turns it into args or something like that. But I don't know off the top of my head what situations it does that in. I think just on the tiny stack or other cases where there is no shell.
Yeah, I was hoping you remembered because I know some things in there, but I don't remember exactly.
This even predates my stewardship of the Buildpacks. This was like Ben stuff from way back in the day.
I mean, even if that were the case, like users currently running on top of the tiny stack don't have an expectation that their shell profile script is going to work because there's no shell in tiny.
Is this something that we can? I don't think anyone disagrees in principle on this, but is there something we could approve the RFC and allow the timing to be up to the language families? You know, if a particular language family feels like they can't implement this until there's a profile build pack, then they can delay for a particular language family. Does that seem reasonable?
I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
I mean, I have no problem just telling someone in the chat if they show up and say you broke my build that they can just use Procfile and that it works. That seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I'm not even sure in the long run I want to encourage .profile to be the interface to solve this problem. Like maybe we want a different hook for arbitrary things that doesn't depend on a specific shell.
I think it also might be nice to have users actually come to us and tell us about the weird, fringy, marginal cases where they're doing weird stuff. Might point out that we're like missing build packs or things that we could support through other utilities.
Yeah, I kind of wonder too how much this just came over from Cloud Foundry and that actually has a use case in the cloud native world. Okay, I can like maybe add some comments to sum up what we talked about here and then merge this in. Seems like everyone's kind of in agreement. And then open up some issues or whatever to reflect the implementation of this.
Sounds good. Moving on from this, we have a proposal to alter the builder order. Last I looked at this, there was some testing that needed to happen, but I don't know if that testing has happened.
I haven't had a chance to run the test yet. No, sorry. I think that one's on me.
All right. And then here are a couple of my own RFCs. These ones are both related to the web servers build pack. I think I've talked about this one previously. The idea here is we're going to add some more support for static file applications that use Node as their like kind of transformer, transpiler to convert from something like a React JSX format into like Babel transpiled ECMA 6 or whatever. So I think I've responded to all of the comments, just like clarifying the motivation and some of the technical aspects here, and then outlined some alternatives and like why I think this is the best approach. And then the last bit was supporting both Nginx and HTTPD. So I've expanded the order grouping to cover both of our web servers and both of the package managers for nodes. There's now 4 order groupings instead of the original 2. That was about it.
I took a look at the rationale rationale and the alternative section that you added, it looks good to me. I largely agree with what you added. I just wanted it documented. So thanks for adding that.
I can't remember exactly who the web service maintainers are. I think it's Arjun and Tim. I have a plus vote for Art from Arjun here.
Yeah, I'll take a look.
Okay. And then the last RSC here is one that's new this week, but it comes from kind of our experience or thinking about what we're going to do with this web servers build pack that we've done a bunch of development on recently. There already exists in the Paketo community a static file build pack. This is largely a lift and shift concept that came from Cloud Foundry. Cloud Foundry also had a static file build pack. There are some actual technical differences in the implementations. So the Cloud Foundry build pack actually had a file that you wrote to disk called static file, similar to Docker file or proc file. And that thing was some key values that you could use to configure the static file build pack in particular ways. That's not what got implemented in the Paketo build pack. Instead, we are using Buildpack YAML, which is now kind of a defunct concept that we want to replace with, say, environment variable configuration. My concern about us just kind of pulling over the static file concept is twofold. Supporting every configuration option through an environment variable means this build pack would respond to like 12 or 15 configuration options, many of which are like not necessarily easily representable in an environment variable string. The other thing is that this build pack is kind of a slippery slope of like things that users want that we have to recreate configuration file formats for that are options that are already available in Nginx and HTTPD if users would just use those configuration formats directly. And so I think what I'm trying to call out with this is that we should not include the static file build pack at all in the web servers language family. I think it's perfectly fine for it to continue to live on in the community, but just not have it be elevated to the Paketo Buildpacks org. So then the question becomes, how do we support this kind of like zero config or like default? I just want you to serve some static files and I don't want to have to learn Nginx configuration format or Apache's configuration format to do that. I just want you to serve like, say, some files in this directory called public. I think the most straightforward way for us to do this is to just have the Nginx or HTTPD build packs respond to an environment variable where we just say like, please use this build pack to like front my static files. If that environment variable is present, then Nginx and HTTPD would be responsible for writing kind of a generically configured configuration file to the right location on disk and then setting the start command so that it would start and serve those files from that location. I think Dan pointed out there's like a handful of options that I guess folks care about quite a lot on the Java side, stuff like push state and enforcing HTTPS. There maybe is an argument to be made that you could say these things are configurable via an environment variable. But I'd really like to look into each one and figure out like how difficult is it actually to specify this with, say, a direct nginx.conf file or HTTPD conf file. I think that covers everything. Looking for, I guess, feedback on this, concerns possibly. All right, doesn't sound like anyone has anything to contribute right here at the moment. Please take a look and yeah, leave comments. That covers all of the RFCs. We've got a couple other things on the agenda. Starting with a project update. So the first thing I see here is that the PHP environment variable configuration RFC was accepted. Does anyone want to say anything about that?
Yeah, it's just been an open RFC for a while. I figured I'd make an announcement here that the environment variable RFC has been accepted. Nothing more than that.
Cool. I assume that means that we'll start seeing like possible PHP build packs with warnings that indicate that buildpack.yaml is deprecated.
Yeah, that would be the first step to be coming out of that.
Cool.
Some of those changes have already been implemented too.
Awesome. The other update here is that the Git credential configuration RFC was accepted. I think this is great.
Yeah, there's an issue currently open that is assigned to me. I am currently rapidly typing away, trying to add this configuration option to Git.
Again, this nominally covers the kind of like HTTPS authenticated Git like token workflow where you're trying to like pull a repo, a private repo that's say on GitHub or something that requires like a username and a password. Cool. I think that should be helpful. All right, that covers the project updates, or at least the ones that are here on the board. The last agenda item I see is libcnb/cnb project needs a way of integration testing build packs. What if Paketo contributed Occam?
Yeah, I stuck this on here because it was directly asked of us at the Buildpack author tooling meeting. Apologies for my lateness. I lost track of time. This is literally what I was meant to bring here to discuss. In the conversation at the Buildpack author tooling meeting, which the notes for which I can find in a second, people generally had very positive feedback about their experience with using Occam. And they had expressed, they being folks who work on libcnb basically, had expressed that it would be useful for users of libcnb to have a way of integration testing build packs. Off the bat, I stated that there might be a concern about this project's ability to iterate quickly on Occam and like own the thing that we rely so heavily on in our testing. But I wanted to bring this topic to the group to hear other opinions and thoughts, rather than representing the project by myself or just me and Dan Makusa.
Yeah, I think the desire from the build pack side is with the system build packs coming up, they're gonna know they need something to test those, and so they're looking to not have to re-implement a tool similar to one that exists.
I think I don't have that many hesitations about it because I don't know how much more needs to be built in or built out from it. I do have some hesitations because it does include things like Buildpack stores, which rely on Freezer, which is still a sort of just community repository owned and solely operated by me. So I think that might be something that we'd have to get in order. There's some other things that I would like to make sure that we had in line before we just sort of wholesale donated the repository.
Yeah, I would say my only concern is like, I'm not sure how I feel about handing over a project and then having to like beg for features, which is like not the situation I have right now where like we actually get to decide what the features are. I don't know if the CNB folks in that meeting discussed what that might look like, how they could accommodate a situation wherein we don't lose a lot of like the, I guess, control over the direction of the project, since that is something we've valued for its entire existence.
I don't know what their policy is on projects that get contributed. I tend to agree, though. It feels like if we're going to contribute this, then we should still maintain in a position to drive it forward and be able to commit changes and things like that. I don't know, Emily, do you know anything about like the policy for projects that get contributed to Buildpacks?
Fortunately, Emily took
Or,
off.
oh, did she drop?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we can certainly circle back and ask that question and try to figure that out. That seems like probably the sticking point, though.
I'm realizing now that I didn't ask in that meeting why particularly it would be important for CNB to own this testing library, perhaps for a similar reason of not wanting to ask us for features, but I might push back on that a little bit. I mean, people are clearly using it now. And,
Yeah.
like, would it be the worst thing to see like a Paketo library in use on like a cloud native Buildpacks distributed repo?
The question is definitely worth asking. I mean, CNB itself takes in dependencies from all sorts of places. Why particularly is this a dependency that they feel that they have to have ownership over?
And that's interesting. I totally didn't think about that either. And I'm wondering, I was thinking maybe there's a policy or something, but you're right. I mean, they pull in stuff from other places. So yeah.
I think I can see a kind of perspective that's, oh, we have a library for building these things. We should have a library that helps people test them because we're kind of like the originators of this concept. And so when you learn about it or building it, you can go to one place and kind of get all the things you need. But for CNB's own use cases, right? If that isn't their intention, if it's just how do we make sure that we have integration testing for the system Buildpacks that we're building, I don't necessarily see an argument that makes a load of sense.
Yeah, I can follow up on those 2 points. We don't have a BAT team meeting this week, but the following.
Awesome. Well, that was the last thing on the agenda. Is there anything last minute that folks wanted to bring up? It doesn't sound like it. All right, well then, until next week, see you all later.
Thanks. Bye-bye.